Welcome everybody to today's webinar, Life Beyond Project Online, Understanding Your Options for Your Project Managers. And that's what we'll be talking about today and showing you today. With that, I am really honored to introduce Scott Derby and Dan Winberg. Scott Derby is Planet's principal cloud strategist. He works closely with customers to align both the business and technical requirements with engagements and solutions provided by Planet. Dan Winberg is our Director of Service Delivery and worked closely with our practice management architects to deliver Planet services. With that, I will, I think I lost my, there we go. With that, I'll kick it over to Scott, who will start with our agenda.
Thank you, Jason. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'll talk through our agenda fairly briefly here, and then we'll get into the meat of the conversation. So I'm sure, as you all know, Microsoft has announced that the retirement of the Project Online solution for September of 2026. That is September 30 is the official date. Anything after that, Project Online will be shutting down, and that will quite honestly be a little bit of the end of an era for Microsoft as they're delivering specific, monolithic PPM solutions. So what we want to talk through today is, well, what does life beyond Project Online look like? So we'll be talking a little bit around kind of what the current state of things look like from Project Online's retirement. What is Microsoft's roadmap and how is that shifting for many organizations? We'll also be then looking at, Microsoft's move from a more of a monolithic PPM solution that Project Online has been providing for many, many years up till now, to more of a collaborative work management strategy. And what does that mean for your organization, and how does that change how you've been managing projects and how how your project managers are conducting their processes to keeping projects on time and on schedule or on budget. Then we'll talk a little bit around what the solution landscape looks like inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. There's several different options that customers can choose from depending on what their needs are, and we'll give you a little bit of a SWOT analysis around what that means. We'll then be talking a little bit around the migration, the realities that they're going to bring, what do you expect during them, and what are some of those consideration and planning factors. And then we're going to show you a few different scenarios that are scenarios that we're using here at Planet, just to give you guys a little bit of context around, some options that might be out there for customers inside of the ecosystem. And then lastly, we're going to go ahead and close things up with an Q&A discussion, Q&A and any discussion that many might have. So with that here, let's go ahead and let's jump right in. And we're going to go ahead and kick it off with a poll. So, obviously they've already announced the end of life for Project Online. So I want to take a quick poll. Where are you in this journey? Are you evaluating tools already today? Are you just beginning? Are you looking at redefining what your project management processes might entail? Have you already begun a migration, or are you ahead of the game and all done and ready for the next chapter? We'll give everyone just a moment here to respond to that. All right. Well, we have a lot of people saying that they're in that phase of evaluating options. So hopefully this session today might help a lot of people in that area. So where are we today? What's the current state of what's happening within Project Online? What are our options? So, obviously the most important part to think about here is that the official retirement date of Project Online is September 30, 2026. So I want to clarify a couple of items to what that means for many organizations. Project Online or Project Web App that has been delivered as part of Office 365 is really what that entails when they talk about the retirement. So the Project Web Apps and Project Online that you've seen as part of your Office 365 environment, that you're accessing via the browser, where I might be able to manage projects, manage resources, have SharePoint sites that are connected specifically to my projects. That is really what's in scope for this overall retirement of it. One of the things I do want to clarify is that the project desktop client that we all download and keep on our machines, that is not affected. So that will continue to be available today, but the online version to where I'm publishing those will be affected, where there is, well, that will be actually retired in end of life. So, now is the time to really begin to think very, very seriously around what's that path to get off there and to move quite quickly if you haven't already begin moving in a single direction. So one of the important things I also want to highlight is that, quite honestly, this is a major shift from a Microsoft perspective. Traditionally, Project Online has really represented a monolithic project and portfolio management solution. I don't say that from a bad term, but more from a holistic solution that really managed everything from the project ideation phase, through the demand management phase, through project scheduling and managing the actual work, to resource management, financial management, as well as handling risks and assumptions, issues, and deliverables as one overall solution set. What Microsoft is shifting now to is more of an integrated collaborative work management ecosystem, I'll say. What you will find is that no single tool is going to have a one-to-one replacement for what Project Online did. What this is really meaning is that as we start to look at migrations, as we start to look at our current processes inside of our organizations, it's driving a little bit of redesign. What I've seen in my experience has been many organizations, when they implemented Project Online originally, they designed some of their process around the tools. Well, for good or bad, this presents an opportunity now for us to be able to redesign our solutions, our processes more effectively to how we're doing business on an everyday basis. Things have changed around how we manage work, and now is a great time to be able to take advantage of that by implementing a new system that really aligns to how we work today. So what we hope you guys will get out of the session today is to really understand what are some of the options inside of the Microsoft ecosystem, and start to be able to create a decision matrix around what's the next steps for you. So what does this shift mean? I talked about it a little bit. Really, Project Online really represented a monolithic system that really had all aspects of a project and portfolio management solution. Now, one of the things that is definitely changed is, if you looked at Project Online, it very much aligned itself to a traditional waterfall methodology, inserted itself quite well for IT-based projects. One of the challenges and one of the things that Microsoft always struggled with in this particular area was it doesn't cross boundaries to be able to managing different types of projects as well. For example, Agile-based solutions, and as more and more companies and organizations are leveraging Agile inside of their development processes, inside of their deployment of projects today, this is really driving us to shift into new work management strategies. And this is a great opportunity now where we can start to reevaluate tools and technologies that better align with more modern practices if we're embracing more agile, or even embracing more hybrid types of methodologies. Other areas that we've seen is that Project Online traditionally did not do as well with more what I'll call construction related projects or physical related projects, where it is more portfolio driven, where you're not necessarily driving and managing to a schedule as much as you're managing a series of vendors that are working underneath a single program. So these are some of the challenges. What I think is out there now is some of these new solutions really provide some different opportunities that I can embrace all of this within a much better platform in a more modern work management style. So one of the other things is we're going to move to a fully cloud native, really think about tools that are more AI powered. A lot of these tools that you'll see, including some of the capabilities within Planner, are going to have native agents that are built in to be able to help me enhance and really drive some efficiencies into our project management practices. So as we kind of think about this, what we're finding now is there's really multiple different tools that are out there. So I want to talk a little bit around kind of what are those tools and what does that mean for us. As we kind of think about this, we're categorizing these tools into two different types. More of a collaborative work management. As we kind of think about collaborative work management tools, the biggest one that's going to come to mind, and is probably the leading one that Microsoft is bringing to the market here, is Planner Premium. And in many cases, your current licensing of Project Online includes your Planner Premium licenses, whether or not it's the Project Online Plan 5 or the Plan 3 license. Planner Premium is included in those license models now. So as we kind of shift away to more of a traditional full PPM, but in a more different style, what you'll find is that, you know, our options now look at tools like Project Server Subscription Edition, or Dynamics 365 Project Operations, or from a Microsoft partner, a solution called OnePlan, all which provide a little bit more closer alignment to a full project and portfolio management solution. But obviously, each of them are going to have a little bit of drawbacks in particular areas. You know, things that you have to be considered as you start looking at shifts to these is looking at some of the tooling that you might be using in Project Online, whether or not it might be enterprise custom fields, SharePoint artifacts, workflows, reports. All these things now have to be taken into consideration as we're migrating, because there really isn't a one-to-one replacement model for these. So these are some of the things you want to start to think about. It's a great opportunity to really bring in a process redesign and some data transformation at that point. So with that said, let's kind of talk specifically around what some of these tools look like. What does that impact bring? So I'll go through each one of these, and then I'm going to go through and actually do a full SWOT analysis on each tool for you to help inform you guys around what's the best decision as you're looking at this. So the first one, and this is really kind of the leading option from Microsoft, is Planner Premium. For those that are not familiar with Planner Premium, it is a premium version built onto the popular Planner work management tool today. It is really best suited from a task tracking and a team collaboration perspective. So the biggest thing is they've really shifted this over to being more of a collaboration tool where teams are working in a little bit more agile type of methodologies to be able to drive towards project completion. One of the things that's a little bit different around this one is that obviously this is a Microsoft 365 native tool. It's going to leverage native Microsoft 365 capabilities like Microsoft 365 groups, teams. It moves away from SharePoint from a collaboration perspective behind it, and it brings it more in application to provide more of a richer experience, far more collaborative. What we typically find is this is a great option for teams that are doing more agile-based work, or they don't have a very structured project or portfolio management practices. Maybe they're not necessarily following more of a traditional PMBOK or project management body of knowledge type of methodologies inside their organizations. One of the the things that we find is that this is from a complexity level. It's typically kind of ranked as a low to medium solution. It's easy to deploy. It represents a direct path to get solutions up and running. You can manage your schedules from Project Online, but it's not necessarily going to bring a full resource management capability. And the biggest thing you want to kind of think about is if you are doing things from an advanced project and portfolio management, such as either resource management or ideation, as an example, you might require to do some custom development that would be focused around leveraging Power Platform and Dataverse to be able to do that. So that's one of the options that's out there. And we'll go through that in a little bit more depth in a few moments. Another option is Project Server Subscription Edition. So If you are in a mode today where you want to continue that traditional project and portfolio management practices and give your users the least impact from an overall, migration perspective and how their processes, and try to make things, quite honestly, as seamless as possible, Project Server represents that particular path for you. The downside that you have from a Project Server perspective is that the deployment model shifts. So it becomes your responsibility, as it's not a SaaS-based solution. It's going to be either move back to an on-premises based server or into a virtual environment inside of Azure to be able to do that. So from a migration perspective, this is actually the smoothest and the easiest path to be able to migrate, because it gives your users that same user experience they've already had. But it does put a lot more on the IT teams, because now you're back to managing that entire infrastructure. So couple things to consider with that. There is a licensing consideration. There is an infrastructure that is required to be able to do that with that one. So we can talk through that one in a little bit more depth here in a moment as well. And one of the other options that we leverage here at Planet is a solution called OnePlan. OnePlan is an offering from a Microsoft partner. They are a direct partner with Microsoft and have been working very closely, and they've been a partner of the year with Microsoft in several categories, mainly in the project management space. This is a SaaS-based solution that I would call a hybrid similarity to Project Online, to be able to give you a rich project and portfolio management solution in a very more, or what I would say is a more modern structure, heavily integrated into your Office 365 side of it. There is some transitions, because as you've shifted to some of the more modern practices, this is going to represent a little bit of complexity around build out changes. It will have some customer impact, but it is also a great option if you need to modernize your environment in a cost-effective way to be able to move forward. One consideration you want to keep in mind is for our customers that are sitting in compliant and sovereign cloud environments where you have to have a FedRAMP authorization. OnePlan does not yet have its FedRAMP ATO. It is working towards that, but it is not there yet. So it's one of the things you do want to kind of keep in mind, especially for a customer who might be operating inside of GCC High, as an example. So, and then the last option is Dynamics 365 Project Operations. This is heavily geared for customers who might need a more heavier financial or resource management type of approach inside of their projects. I would say if you're customers that are heavily leveraging Dynamics today, this is a great option. It is a fairly major shift because of its dependencies on the rest of the Dynamics ecosystem. And it can be a little bit more expensive, because quite honestly, it's a whole different licensing model that's significantly more expensive than a direct Project Online. So these are some of the 4 different options that we'll evaluate through the course of the conversation here today. No. So with that, let's take a look at a little bit of a SWOT analysis. Let's talk about Planner Premium here, and what does that mean? As we've really kind of evaluated what this means for our customers, number one, the strengths are, it is a really strong integration within the Microsoft 365 environment. If you are looking for a really easy to use collaborative tool that has a low barrier to adoption and helps me to be able to really foster communication among my teams, Planner is a great option from that perspective. Some of the things you want to kind of think about, though, as you look at some of the weaknesses of it, is it doesn't necessarily have as much as the advanced project and portfolio management capabilities. So it will not have things like project ideation. It will not have tooling like project demand management. It won't have portfolio management where I might be aligning projects and evaluating which projects to move forward with based on strategic goals and initiatives like Project did. And also, it does not have the rich depth of resource management. While you will have resource management at a project level, it lacks that ability to be able to look across multiple projects and quickly identify, where you have team members that are way over allocated looking at the multiple projects they might be juggling on a day-to-day basis. So um, as you kind of think about this one, I would say if I compare any of them that provide the most extensibility, Planner Premium is one of those to be able to do that because it's automated. It's natively built on Power Platform in the Dataverse. It has a full API, and in fact, Microsoft even presents some GitHub options that are out there that help you do project and portfolio management wrappers around it that you can leverage with citizen development in a low code, no code. But I will say that is a lot of work that you're going to have to be doing to reevaluate some of your business processes. So it's definitely something to kind of keep in mind. From a threat perspective, there is some technical debt that you're going to take on when you have to think about some of these customizations when doing that, because obviously that shifts more responsibility into your hands versus just using a native out-of-the-box SaaS-based solution. And you won't have some of the scalability that you've had inside of maybe mature PMOs with a tool like Project or Planner, simply because it just doesn't have some of the capabilities around the financial and the resource management that are critical at a portfolio management inside of our PMOs. So those are a couple things to kind of keep in mind. A great option that's out there, but definitely something that is going to be a fairly significant shift from your end users and would require a little bit of work from an organizational change management perspective to make sure your users are prepared for that option. We'll shift. Let's talk a little bit around Project Server Subscription Edition. So if we look at Project Server Subscription Edition, this represents the most direct path from project online for users that it has going to have minimal impact into our project managers and team members and how they're managing and reporting on projects today. It is going to be a very familiar user experience. It's going to have strong governance and strong reporting capabilities from that perspective. Because essentially it is Project Server. What you're taking on in this particular case is it's back to that you're running the infrastructure to be able to maintain that environment, which ultimately kind of puts it into a category of a little bit of a weakness, because now that's back on you to be able to maintain and manage that infrastructure. There is a small licensing transition that needs to be considered as you're moving away from Project Online. One of the other things that I will say as well, it's there and it is absolutely an option. It doesn't have a strong roadmap from an innovation perspective from Microsoft. So the innovation is very obviously going into Planner Premium in other tools and less away from Project Server Subscription Edition there. So kind of a couple of things to kind of keep in mind. If you're a organization that is, very risk adverse, this might be a great path for you guys because it's a very easy transitional path. But obviously there's some things to kind of keep in mind from that perspective, because quite honestly, you're moving back away from what would be more of a traditional cloud first strategy back to more of a legacy strategy, is kind of thinking about managing this overall environment, which also means there is going to be some operational cost to overhead that you want to be thinking about it. And you're going to have a declining talent pool, quite honestly, for who can manage these environments and to be able to deploy environments like this because of kind of the aging infrastructure that it is running on. So it's just a couple of things to kind of keep in mind as you're evaluating your different options out here. I'll talk a little bit around OnePlan and what does that mean. So OnePlan is a SaaS-based solution that is built entirely within Azure and Office 365. It runs natively inside of a customer's tenant from that perspective. It's actually received a fairly high ranking from the Gartner Peer Insights perspective. And actually, this is a solution that we've elected to leverage here at Planet for our project management operations. How we've looked at this is we've compared it in our, one of the things you want to kind of keep in mind is if I'm looking for a SaaS-based solution that gives me the closest replacement offering from a project online, this is one that we feel aligns to that one. It has very strong project portfolio and governance features. It has good, strong resource management capabilities. It's got great integration within Power BI and Microsoft 365, and it implements directly inside of your Microsoft tenancy so that you have kind of a very much a first party type of experience. Even though it is not technically a first party solution from Microsoft, it is coming from a Microsoft partner from that perspective. So obviously, because it's not a Microsoft first party, we have to kind of keep that in mind. One of the other things that it is still in process from OnePlan, it is not fully finished today, but they are in process of completing their FedRAMP authorization. So this is definitely a consideration for those of our customers that are sitting inside of the defense industrial base, or maybe need to be compliant with something like CMMC, or are sitting inside of GCC High. Definitely something to kind of keep in mind. It is, again, on their roadmap. It is just not there today as we speak. So, and while this is a little bit of a smaller organization, they are developing their partner ecosystem, but I will say their partner ecosystem is developing quite quickly. So I would suspect that they will overcome many of these kind of weaknesses fairly quickly from that perspective. One of the biggest opportunities that we feel that this provides an option is that it's a rapid deployment timeline, especially as the clock is ticking for Project Online. This is something that can quite honestly be up and running in a 6 to 8 week time frame quite easily to be able to get you off of Project Online, and presents a good path to be able to consider from that perspective. So you'll see as I'll share some screenshots here in a little bit, it also gives us an opportunity where we can have a flexible approach as we're modernizing different processes inside of our PMO from that perspective. So as you think about some of the threats of this one, obviously, typical threats that you might see with a little bit of a smaller partner type of organization like this is obviously they're always subject to some vendor dependency outside of Microsoft. You may have some market consolidation over time with this particular tool, although nothing's on the roadmap, but something that kind of keep it in the long range vision. And then obviously, not here today, but they're definitely working to get it addressed fairly shortly, is actually having an ATO from FedRAMP, a FedRAMP compliance perspective. So lastly, I'm going to talk about Project Dynamics 365 project operations. Now, again, this is another option from Microsoft. I would rate this as more of the enterprise grade tool. One of the things that is different is this is designed to be heavily integrated within Dynamics 365, both from an ERP and a CRM perspective. So we see this really deployed in large scale organizations. Quite honestly, many organizations that are in more of a professional services type of realm, because it does allow you native integration to be able to move a project through the sales cycle inside of CRM to quickly being turned over to a delivery project that is sitting in project operations. And then, of course, it's going to have integration with the finance side of it on your ERP systems within Dynamics 365. So obviously, because of that, it does give itself, quite honestly, probably a little bit of a strength and a threat to a great degree, simply because the threat comes from the complexity that comes along with that big of an integration side of it. It is a very strong tool from the perspective of resource management and financial management, although there are a few capabilities that are not available inside of Dynamics project operations from looking at resource on an enterprise-wide perspective like Project Online did. But I believe some of those are looking to get mitigated here shortly. So I would say this is a fairly complex shift for many customers who are doing Project Online today, simply because the way it's integrating across the entire Dynamics platform. This is going to bring a pretty steep learning curve for many organizations as they're really getting their project managers online and adopting it. It will leverage some of the same scheduling capabilities that are being used inside of Planner Premium, bringing that into, so they're trying to share it across platforms to be able to have that scale. So it's a great option from that perspective, but definitely is going to be having, some particular areas that you have to kind of keep in mind as you think about what that adoption path looks like. As you think about some of the opportunities, like I mentioned, great for professional services firm where you're looking for something that has that end-to-end aspect, whether it's looking at a project going through like the initial lead to sales to project into finance life cycle of it. It's got great end-to-end business integration capabilities, and of course there's lots of integration within Copilot and some of the AI capabilities from Microsoft's Dribbling, but it is a fairly complex tool. I think one of the other things to kind of keep in mind is it is a fairly expensive tool, as the licensing can be upwards of, at least last I've seen, upwards of $150 a user a month for some organizations. So it's a fairly sizable investment if you compared it to what was Project Online right out of the gate. So those are just kind of a brief SWOT analysis around some of the tools and what's out there. So I want to kind of take a minute here. I want to shift gears and I want to talk a little bit around some of the migration considerations that we need to be keeping in mind here. As I said at the beginning, there isn't really a one-to-one path from a Project Online perspective. So as I'm starting to be able to look at migrations and those where I might be looking at different areas, some of the things that are important to keep in mind. Think about what you've defined inside of enterprise custom fields and maybe lookup tables that you've defined into Project Online. Often this is going to include some critical data around our portfolios. It might include critical data that we're capturing around financial operations within the projects. These are things that you have to look at and identify a path. Some may not be able to migrate cleanly depending on what solution you choose. And so depending on how critical those data elements are, you want to kind of keep that in mind because again, there really isn't a one-to-one migration path. Obviously, inside of Project Online, as we all know, it leveraged SharePoint project sites where it created a SharePoint site in a separate site collection and then linked it to the project plan where it then stored risks, issues, deliverables, etc. Inside of those individual project sites. As we're shifting away, that is something you have to kind of carefully consider. All of these are using a slightly different collaborative architecture than necessarily just the native project sites. So you have to think about, okay, for issues and risks, how am I migrating them? Where are they going to go? What does that mean? It can bring a little bit more complexity if you're using the native connected capabilities. For many organizations, what we've seen is if you're not using the connected SharePoint sites and maybe you're using a disconnected SharePoint site, it may be as easy as just a simple SharePoint migration or maybe even repointing sites, depending on how you've structured that. So other things to kind of keep in mind, your reporting dependencies. If you're leveraging the Power BI, any of the OData sources, or creating custom reports, all of these will have to be remapped and reshifted because it will be a whole new architecture from the data perspective. So those are some other impacts that you want to kind of keep in mind. Other parts might be thinking about what am I doing with financial data, and specifically thinking about timesheets. So if you've leveraged timesheets, there are paths for timesheets inside of tools, obviously, like Project Server Subscription Edition. There's a path for timesheets inside of OnePlan, and there's a path inside of Dynamics 365 project operations, but they need to be carefully remapped. With the exception of Project Server Subscription Edition, you cannot pull across historical ones. So you may be looking at building out a reporting solution that sits as a third-party layer to be able to bring that historical data across, which is pretty common, but it's something to consider as you're looking at the overall data migration paths. Just some of the security things to be thinking about. If you're using some of the more traditional Project Server security model or the SharePoint security model in a project server, Many of these will need to be remapped because it is just a very, very different migration path from that perspective. You definitely want to think carefully around what are your compliance requirements. So if you are in GCC High, if you are in FedRAMP, this is going to be something you want to kind of think about really what that means. So I believe Project Service Subscription Edition can operate natively inside of that type of environment today if you're looking at that. One plan is coming from that one, but it is not that there today. And I believe Dynamics 365 Project Operations Planner Premium, to my knowledge, has not had all of its capabilities. It does have a core component of there inside of GCC High, but not all of them. So obviously, with any types of scenario, there is going to be some feature parity differences between that in GCC High. So you want to kind of keep that in mind as well. So any integration that you've developed, any Power Automate workflows and SharePoint designers will need to be reevaluated as you're moving those across as well. So there's going to be lots of impacts into the overall migration perspective. Lastly, but certainly not least, is processes. In my opinion, this represents a great time where we can maybe modernize some of our practices inside of our PMO, because we maybe have built them specific to Project Online, or they're really heavily catered around Project Online. Now I have the ability to really kind of change and shift. Although when doing that, obviously that's going to bring an impact where we're going to have to take a little bit extra time to consider the organizational change management that's going along with that, helping making sure that we're doing a little bit more thoughtful approach to training and adoption planning as you're doing this overall migration plan here. So these are just some of the considerations that you want to keep in mind as you're preparing for this overall migration set. So lessons learned. There is no one-to-one replacement. I think I've talked about that quite a few times. Make sure you take the time to really understand, what are the right models for you, and to be able to then align that accordingly as you're shifting away from Project Online. Understand what this shift means for you. Obviously, all of these solutions are a little bit different from that perspective. So you want to make sure that you look at the governance, the reporting, the resource management, financial management, all are critical things. Don't underestimate some of the hidden scope, even the little things like the security models, the SharePoint artifacts, timesheets. All of those can bring some migration complexity that you want to think through very, very carefully from that perspective. So I can't underestimate the business impact. Obviously, all of our project managements have a big impact into our business. This has really been, if you're utilizing Project Online, kind of that lifeblood tool that's in your environment. So the shifts here are going to have some impact. You want to make sure that you really invest in some organizational change management, process improvements, if viable, to help really kind of mitigate that one from your customers. So, and this is quite honestly, this is a great time to be able to look at some viable alternatives and maybe start to look at how I'm realigning my individual processes and practices to kind of, how I more modernize how my PMO is working moving forward. So with that, let's go ahead, and I'm going to share through a few different scenarios. I know many of those scenarios are probably things some people have seen, so I wanted to take a minute and give people a glimpse at a tool like OnePlan, since that is probably the least known in that market there. So I'm going to show a few different scenarios just to give you a little bit of screenshots. I'm going to start with resource management for a moment here. So to give you just a little taste of what's happening, OnePlan is designed to be a fairly flexible, you'll see it's a little bit more modern type of experience from a project management point of view. As customer, one of the big things that we've seen is that resource management is one of the big challenges that none of the tools really had a great approach to. And so OnePlan actually, from our perspectives, brought a really good option to be able to do that. So it allows for me the ability to look at a resource over time, and I can quickly see in a heat map, where am I over allocated? Where am I maybe in danger, which is kind of represented in the red, versus maybe where do I have, am I fine from a resource allocation? So what you'll notice here is that this is looking at it from the context of an individual project. Within that, I can see that I've got a couple of resources here that are over allocated. And what you'll see in the next views is I can actually click in and then see very quickly, well, this individual project may not bring me to fully over allocated. Obviously, there's a culmination of multiple projects that are, so it gives me that visibility across my entire portfolio of projects to see where do I have a problem area inside of my resource teams and how do I then address that appropriately. Now, a couple of the other things that I'll call out here, you do have the ability to customize how you look at this with customized views, the ability to create custom columns, create comparisons, do slicers on date filters, etc. As we start to look at this, then I'm going to actually drill into this one more step, and now I can actually see again, this allows me to be able to see where do I have specific projects that is leading me to a resource to being way over allocated, so that I can start to be able to do a little bit more holistic planning around what the right option for that customer is, or excuse me, for what our project needs and where's the right people to be able to leverage from this perspective. So in this particular case, again, similar view, but now I can actually get into a detailed resource summary where I can see all the projects, who the project manager is and what phase they're currently in, and then where am I over allocated on a week over week basis. And just to give you another example of that one where I can look at and see kind of different ways to be able to slice this data appropriately as I'm managing my overall resource teams on various projects. So I wanted to show this because obviously if you think about something like Planner Premium, one of the biggest things that we found is that it didn't have the detail from a resource management perspective. And this actually gives me a great way to be able to have a hybrid tool that is a little bit more modern from a project management perspective that does give me very detailed resource management capabilities inside of the environment. So I'm going to shift here and I want to talk a little bit around resource management. So for many of our organizations, obviously we're all used to using project. We're used to seeing it within a Gantt chart in list views. Used to seeing it maybe where I've got typical dependencies among projects or among tasks within the project. And I want to be able to quickly see durations and starts and finish, right? Very traditional view that we're all used to seeing on an everyday basis. Well, obviously I have that capability here within this view. You'll notice up here, I've got a work type option too that allows me to change that so I can see the schedule in different ways, whether I want to have the Gantt chart with my bars, or what I can also do is that as I have projects that might have a more of an agile type of approach, and I really am more comfortable working in a methodology where I have a Kanban board to be able to support my work styles within that project. This allows me to be able to do that. In fact, here, you'll notice up here, I have an option where there's a little bit of there's a detail called work plan at the very top. I can select that work plan and it'll shift this work plan from being the list view to being a board view, much like this. So here I can look at that, and that board may have status based on the health around, where do I have tasks? Are they completed? Are they in progress? If we needed to defer a task, I could move that into a new bucket, and this is all designed to be very easy drag and drop type of experience within that. So if you are wanting something that is going to give you a more agile type of methodology within that, this has the tooling to be able to support that as well. But yet it leverages the same schedule so that I can very quickly go in and still get the details I want from a project management perspective to be able to pull out and see, well, for example, what resources are assigned to it. In fact, you can see little pictures down here that are indicating what resources from the team are assigned to that particular project. And if I click into that, I can actually get more details around the task and where that particular task might sit in that overall state. The last one I want to show here is actually then to go ahead and let's take a look at some of the reporting. Obviously, one of the key things that we want to be able to do is really automate as much of that reporting as possible. Again, this was one of the things that we looked at. This represents an out-of-the-box status report where I can very quickly have really detailed status reporting that I can provide. So we might be looking at 3 different areas or metrics as we kind of think about the overall health status of a project. We could look at the scope, we can look at the schedule, we can look at the financial aspects. I can see where's their impacts. Are we at risk? Are we on track? Or are we in the red? On particular areas, if we are at risk, I can see any of the particular risks that are driving there, as well as what mitigation activities need to be done to help bring that back on task. I can have summaries that are showing me key accomplishments that have been done this week, what's on track for the next 2 weeks, as well as more of the facts around the projects, around who they're working with, different pop periods, etc. So that gives you a little bit of details specifically around some of the different options. So I just wanted to share a little bit of one plan, because that's obviously one option that is out there that many have or may not have seen. So just to kind of give you a flavor of what some of those are. So one of the things now I want to kind of conclude with here is, what's the decision framework look like? What are the things that I need to keep in mind? And I think we've talked about many of this throughout the course of the conversation here today. But keep in mind, what's the complexity of your portfolio? Are you looking for simple task tracking, or do you need to have full portfolio governance with dependencies and financials? This is going to drive which way and what projects or what solution I'm going to look at on a big basis. Financial and resource management. As we talked about, if this is a key element for you, you'll notice there the field narrows pretty quickly around what gives me that best financial and resource management capabilities from tracking my projects and tracking resources. Compliance requirements is a number one. If I need to be FedRAMP authorized, if I need to be sitting in GCC high, or even higher level compliance environments, that's another consideration that I need to keep in mind that will help me kind of narrow down, what does this decision path look like for me? What are my customization tolerances? How much do I have to do out of the box with configurations versus where do I have to go in and do full development? And what risk am I willing to absorb if I do the full development are definitely going to impact part of what, why you want to look at. And then depending on where you're at today, if you're still in that evaluation phase, obviously the clock is ticking with September 30th coming up here quite quickly. So that becomes another issue where you want to think about, what does that migration path look like? Because keep in mind, you may need 6 to 8 weeks or maybe more, depending on how much and how large your organization is from a complexity of the project management side of it. And then finally, keep in mind the organizational readiness aspect. Change management, maturity around those models, training capacity are all key elements that I want to be able to keep in mind as I do that. So I would really recommend kind of keeping in mind a decision framework similar to this that is going to help me quickly kind of narrow down what the right solution is here today. So lastly, I'm going to close up with just a few different recommended approaches. Really start with assessing your current environment inside a project online. Perform some use case mapping and identify those key processes and practices that you're using from a PMO perspective. Making sure that you evaluate any of your compliance and security needs so that I can select the right tool. What I would say if I'm ranking these, if I'm looking for a simple migration and I have very simple practices, Planner Premium is a great way to go. If I have a more moderate environment and I want to update this, but I still want to have some of the more traditional PPM type of solution sets, OnePlan is a great option from that perspective. If I have a pretty complex environment from Project Online and really can't afford a huge shift, then maybe Project Server Subscription Edition is the right path for you. So these are just some of the things to kind of keep in mind. And then with that eye and that future state is, what's my governance model, workflows going to look like? How is that migration strategy that we talked about earlier going to kind of keep in mind? What's the training and change management plan, are all things to kind of consider through that one. So with that, we're going to go ahead and put out our next poll. So we're going to shift here. We want to hear from you. What are some of the sessions that you'd like to hear from us? So we'd love to get your vote around kind of what are some sessions that you'd like to hear from Planet in the future. Obviously, we really value your input in the You Already Own It program. So we'd love to kind of get your feedback here planning for some of our next sessions. And then after that, we'll go ahead and open up to Q&A.